Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 AMS Weather Band Symposium. This year, we have 6 fantastic sessions over the next 2 days, during which experts within our field will share knowledge and expertise with you, our audience. Speaking of you, our audience, you, our Weather Band members, chose this year's Symposium topics based on the interest of our webinars and digital content throughout the year. We wanted this to be an interactive experience, so please post any questions in the YouTube chat channel to engage with our panelists during their presentations. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gideon.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa. And once again, hello and welcome everyone to AMS Weather Band's first Symposium 2025 webinar session. This is Warned, the science behind weather safety messaging with Amanda Curran, Kevin Klossel, and our moderator, Steve Glazier. Before we begin, though, I would like to address some of the guidelines for the Symposium webinar today. If you have any questions for the webinar or during the webinar, please put them in the YouTube chat that you will see, should be to the right of your broadcast screen on your computer. We will have dedicated time for audience questions after the presentation, but if there are questions that arise during the course of the presentation that fit the flow of the presentation, they will be addressed at that time. Additionally, all communication should be appropriate for a professional audience that includes individuals from diverse backgrounds. Please be inclusive and respectful with your interactions. And now, I'd like to introduce today's moderator. Steve Glazier is a broadcast meteorologist currently working at NBC Connecticut in Hartford. He is going into his 17th year as a broadcast meteorologist after graduating from Lyndon State College in Vermont with a bachelor's degree in meteorology and an associate degree in television news. Steve is a New England native and caught the weather bug when he was in first grade. So Steve, I'll hand it off to you, and thank you very much.
All right, Gideon. Thanks so much, my friend. Good to see you and good to see everybody too. And happy Thursday. Happy beginning of the Symposium. Here we go. It's a 2-day event. This is the 3rd time we've done it with the AMS Weather Band. They've been high successes. A lot of work goes into it. So I want to thank the whole committee that helps to put this whole thing together. It's a fun event. The topics, like Gideon mentioned, chosen by you and what you want to hear about and learn about. So we're really excited to discuss these things, teach, and just talk about weather. That's why we're all here. I do also want to give a shout out to and a big appreciation to Mr. Doug Hildebrand. He has been an integral part of the committee on the AMS Weather Band, and he helped start this session that kicks off the Symposium. He was unable to finish it with me, so I'm just kind of taking the work that we did together and carrying it to the finish line. But Doug got us started, so he's not with us today on the webinar, but I wanted to give him a shout out before we got going. So welcome to Warned, and we're going to talk about science communication, the warning process, and I'm going to share my screen to get the presentation going. And again, hope everybody's having a really good day. I'm coming in from Hartford, Connecticut, where we currently have 39 degrees, cloudy, drizzly, and spring-like. And probably, like many of you, this week is a lot warmer than it was last week. Last week, we didn't get, terribly cold, but we had an ice storm 2 weekends ago, and with the cold that followed, everything was just icy. Everybody can see my screen, I hope. And
looks good, Steve.
Thank you, Gideon. Okay, well, again, want to give our also appreciation to our 2 panelists today, Amanda Curran, who you'll meet first in the bio, and then Dr. Kevin Klossel, joining us from the National Weather Service Office, CWA of Fort Worth, Dallas. So he is in the heart of Texas. So we'll meet Kevin in just a moment. But I do want to introduce you to Amanda. Maybe you've seen her on social media, or maybe in your local news market if you're joining us from parts of Alabama. Amanda joined WSFA 12 News in July 2014 as a meteorologist. So Amanda, congrats on just passing the 10-year mark. That's huge.
Thank you.
Especially at the TV station. Really nice job there. Before moving to the heart of Dixie, Amanda grew up in New Hampshire, and she spent 4 years in Vermont. You'll notice by the shirt she's wearing, she had her bachelor's degree in atmospheric sciences and associate's degree in television studies from Lyndon State College, which is now known as Northern Vermont University. It's gone through a couple of name changes. In her almost 11 years as a broadcast meteorologist, Amanda has had plenty of opportunity to cover it all. Snowstorms, especially this winter in the South. We'll ask her about that and her experience today. To rounds and rounds of annual severe thunderstorms, sometimes many of them coming in within a couple weeks. And Alabama, like many meteorologists there, keeps Amanda on her toes. Her work on the air and in the field has been recognized by the Alabama Broadcasters Association and Associated Press, along with the Southeast Regional Emmys and Edward Murrow organizations. In 2017, Amanda earned the AMS's CBM, the Certified Broadcast Meteorologist designation. That's a professional recognition of the quality of her weather broadcasts, and it's a very nice thing to have as part of a broadcast meteorologist within AMS. In addition, she also loves to go into the community, meet new people, and when we did our tech check, she was showing us an Alabama weather guide, which was really cool. So good work being done there in the state. And she enjoys running, watching football, spending time with her shelter dog, Tanner, which you might hear barking because he's not allowed in the show, I guess.
He would steal the show and just kind of take the spotlight away from what's important, unfortunately. He just has that kind of personality.
Oh my goodness. Well, maybe we can meet him at the end. And the last line that you'll see here, she is a Patriots and Red Sox fan like I am, and I always get gripe about it from everybody. But that's all right. So Amanda, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk weather when I'm not at work. And so it will be great to have a discussion with everybody today. Hopefully answer some questions too.
Yes, we encourage your questions. Drop them in the chat. We'll also have Q&A here on the YouTube stream. So we are looking forward to that. All right, let's meet Dr. Kevin Claisel. He is responsible for providing weather forecasts and weather safety information to the University of Oklahoma stakeholders and direct forecast and weather decision making for hundreds of events annually on the OU campus. He develops and leads weather safety training on the OU campus for its over 30,000 students, faculty, and staff, and serves as weather subject matter expert for the Event Safety Alliance and the National Center for Spectator Sports Safety and Security. He also teaches a number of FEMA emergency preparedness classes for leadership in higher ed institutions across the nation. In addition, and Kevin, I'm sorry, I was trying to bullet point all the things that you have done and continue to do, and I couldn't fit it on here. So good work, sir. I tried to pinpoint the best of the best. But in addition, Kevin serves as director of the Oklahoma Climatological Survey, one of the largest such surveys in the country. OCS is charged with providing weather and climate data, analysis, and expertise to stakeholders and decision makers throughout the state, and operates the Oklahoma Mesonet Weather Observing Network, which I'm sure you've heard of. He also serves on the State of Oklahoma Hazard Mitigation Task Force. Kevin, did you leave anything out, or is there even more to that?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, all of those things kind of ended just recently with my retirement from the University of Oklahoma. And I think we had a conversation about the fact that that retirement lasted about 8 days. And now I have picked up, if you remove the word OU or Oklahoma and insert the word Baylor University, I'm now hanging out with my friends in athletics at Baylor University and doing all of those things that you just said, but in a different location down here in Texas.
Okay. All right, Kevin. So we'll dive a little bit more into what you've been up to too in the past year or so. So here's what we're going to talk about with this first kickoff of the 25 Jamposium, safety and warning. And this was a snapshot of radar scope, which I'm sure if you're watching and you're part of the AMS weather band, you go through your cell phone and you probably have tons of snapshots and screenshots of radar scope. But this was when I was working at Weather Nation in Denver, Colorado, and I worked there for almost 8 years. And we didn't get a lot of tornado warnings. We got clipped by some that would pass east of Denver and go into the plains. But there were a couple that were coming off the foothills, and it was in the midst of a few of these polygons. So ironically, a room full of meteorologists at Weather Nation, we got the warning we had to look outside. though that's a part of visual confirmation. So we'll talk about safety a lot in this webinar. But here's what you'll learn from this. Here's what we're going to get into. Safety messaging is a matter of life and death. No matter how accurate the forecast is, during these high impact events, preparedness and protective actions that people take determines the outcome for the community. So we're going to dive into the importance of weather safety, messaging, how messaging has evolved, good and bad ways to communicate, and ways we can minimize our risk from extreme weather. So I'll be bouncing questions and discussions off of Kevin and Amanda and myself. And if you have any questions, we really encourage you to ask them. And we'll have the folks watching the Q&A or the question chat, we'll have them interject to answer some of your questions. So we really kind of want to make this interactive so that you're not just watching, but you can also participate in some of these questions. Now, I got together about a dozen questions. I don't know if we'll get through all of them for the sake of time, but I kind of put them in the order that I wanted to first, and maybe address some of the things that I thought were really good discussion points first. So let's talk about these key elements. So let's bring in Amanda first. We'll have you bounce your thoughts off this. What are some key elements of an effective weather safety message? So key things to have in there, and in your opinion.
I think the most important thing in a world where we are obviously trying to predict the uncertainty of a science that is not exact, it is really important for us to try to be not simple in the sense that you don't want to maybe talk about in great detail of what's going on, but trying to use less words to communicate really, I think, can make the messaging a lot simpler and easier for people to understand. We, as broadcast meteorologists, are responsible for meeting people in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places. And it's really easy to think that it's 2025. Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has reliable wireless internet. Everybody has access to all of these different platforms. But as a broadcast meteorologist for the past decade, I've realized that people are in a lot of different places. So really keeping the messaging as simple as possible, and then also making sure that we're able to break down details and communicate uncertainty, because that's always an element in our forecast. I don't think that I can count on more than one hand a forecast that I said, this is a slam dunk. I, with 100% certainty, know that exactly this is going to happen, and there is no room for error and there is no room for change. A lot of what happens in Alabama weather is constantly changing. I like to refer to it as a living, breathing thing that is constantly evolving. So trying to keep the messaging simple, but not necessarily using more words to say less. We want to use less words to try to say more, emphasize the things that are important, like impacts, things that are important to people that maybe as a meteorologist, we get kind of cool and nerdy and look at all the behind the scenes stuff, but really we have to think about it from a viewer perspective. What is the impact to the viewer and their life? And everybody's different. So making sure that we meet people where they're at and figuring out what the most important impact for them is. Sometimes I think we can get swept up as meteorologists wanting to be as technical and scientific as possible. And while there are moments for that, when you're communicating to a general public, you need to be able to see your message from their perspective. And I think when you think about it like that, it definitely helps your communication style moving forward. And then people can really relate to that and look to you in the future when another event happens, because you always know there's going to be another event around the corner.
Yeah, there always is. Like you said, you're breathing, your Alabama breathing organism and the weather. I agree. Yeah, it's like information overload. There's so much out there, and less is more. Yeah, I agree with you, Amanda. Kevin, do you have any thoughts and agree with what Amanda said?
Absolutely. And if you would allow me to share one slide, I would like to piggyback on what Amanda just said. First of all, I would say I don't agree with the Red Sox taking Alex Bregman from my Astros. But at the same time, I completely agree with my two colleagues that less is more. These are two examples of a lightning safety message in elementary schools, both here in the States and overseas. And like Amanda was saying, right, it's the less words is more, but it's the impact, it's the imagery, is can we combine education with our messaging in a way And I know if you look on the right, and I know I don't want to throw my amazing friends at the National Weather Service under the bus, but this is a fuzzy lion with his back to the storm, and he's outside and he's smiling, and he kind of looks like a lot of the University of Oklahoma students when they go chasing and they're taking selfies with the tornado and all of those things that we don't want them to do, right? This is not do as I say, not as I do. We want to do. We want to set the example. Versus this poster from Thailand with respect to lightning safety, you don't need to understand what's written there to know that the elementary school kids in Thailand have a different respect for lightning and what it can do, even though it's in this caricature way. Less is more, and let's try to be relevant, right? Let's try to be relevant to our audiences, and that means we may need a number of different styles and types of communication where we're trying to juxtapose both the education piece and the warned information piece together. I would think and I would hope that our audience would see the big difference between lightning safety messaging in these two cases, right? One is kind of fluffy and fuzzy and maybe sends the wrong message. The other is very direct, right? And you can talk to any child in the third grade in Thailand, and they're like, I don't want to go outside during a lightning storm because I don't want to look like that. And so we have to think about, how we have these messages, and it's not going to be one size fits all.
Out of curiosity, Kevin, where'd you find that picture?
In Thailand.
You were you there?
Yes.
Oh, wow. The story for a whole other webinar for another time. Isn't that amazing?
I'm grateful they let me bring it back with me and borrow it. So
that's fantastic. I am always amazed when you travel how different everything is and the communication of it too. And like you mentioned, I mean, I am so used to seeing these graphics and just kind of look at them. And from my standpoint, doing this in TV, I'm always looking for accuracies and any typos, make sure it looks okay. But you bring up a good point, the lion's back to the lightning and frizzy hair and like the students wearing shorts and flip-flops out there. All right, let's see. Everybody can hopefully still see this. I took over the sharing. So we did the key messages. So this is one that I've always had a tough balance without, how do you stress the urgency without seeming like you're hyping it or seeming like you're being way over the top and too much to ingest from the viewer standpoint. For me, being a broadcast meteorologist, I have actually kind of been guilty of doing the opposite, where it's so urgent, where I like tone it back so much because I don't want to be scaring anybody, but I almost sound kind of monotone and almost too calm for the situation. So I feel like I've overcorrected sometimes. But Amanda, have you thought about this one? You've covered so many severe storms, and hurricanes. So how do you balance that urgency without panic?
I think one of the big things for us is your tone of voice. And there's obviously a time and a place for what we do as broadcast meteorologists. Today is a quiet, sunny day, and I probably won't have a super serious tone when I go on and do our evening newscasts tonight. But we also now 6-7 days out have the possibility for severe weather. So for what we do with our first alert branding, we do reserve these things called first alert weather days. I know that's kind of a big thing in the broadcast industry over the past 5-7 years, having these alert days, having these urgent days. But what we try to do when we issue those, or we get ready to ramp up to potentially warn somebody of high impact weather, is to not necessarily say, oh, remember last week when we had storms? Well, this is going to be exactly the same. I think a lot of people really inherently want to compare their past experiences. And with us, we always try to have it be a clean slate. Say every severe weather system that comes through the state of Alabama, they are all inherently and uniquely different. There are a lot of different ingredients and elements that go into forecasting severe storms. And we always try to find a way to explain it to people that, yes, we might have done this 2 days ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, but no severe weather situation ever rolls out from start to finish exactly the same way. So when we start off on a clean slate and say, hey, we're watching this, and this is something that we're going to give you updates on. And then we try to gradually ramp up. I think, Steve, that's probably one of the big things that is a challenge as a broadcast meteorologist is you don't want to come out too hot too fast. But also, I think it's okay to talk to viewers in a way that maybe consultants don't like. When I say that, I mean more so as we can tell you, hey, 6-7 days from now, there looks like there's going to be potential severe weather. But right now, our confidence in tornadoes is not high. That might increase. And when it does, we're going to let you know. That might decrease. If that changes, we will let you know. When you do that, I feel like it brings the viewer in and has them in the step-by-step with you. And the process of going through the severe weather checklist of saying, okay, we are 5 to 7 days out. There are signs pointing to it. There's no need to panic. There's a lot of people, especially in the Deep South, who do have a lot of storm anxiety. So remembering that when you talk to. But I think the gradual ramp up process, I think I'd like to lean more on the conservative side when it comes to not showing model runs 280 hours out, not showing worst case scenarios. I don't really think that any of that really benefits anyone. It kind of just puts some more data out into the world that makes things confusing. And also being a resource for your viewers and letting them ask questions. I always say, hey, you got any questions? Drop them in the comments. I know we can't have that conversation back and forth during a 3-minute main weather during the 6 o'clock evening news, but being there on social media, having your inbox open, whether that's on Facebook or X or even your email inbox, and having that conversation with your viewers really gives them that connection with you. And I feel like the urgency part of it definitely, to kind of go back to the beginning, comes with your tone of voice. If you are calm, cool, and collective, I don't think that that's going to freak anybody out. If you go, oh my gosh, this is going to be the worst thing in the entire world, which usually it's not, I think that the viewer can understand from your tone the urgency. And I think they understand inherently that urgency can change and can change very quickly. And so your tone can then project that. When something changes and does so pretty quickly, that is when you need to ramp up your tone and do so quickly to match the situation.
I don't get to watch you locally much, Amanda, being in Connecticut now, but it seems like you're very real. This is how it is. This is what we're watching. Not getting too crazy with each model run update and everything. So level-headed. I like that.
For
Kevin,
sure.
Kevin, have you ever run into, in your long career, through retirement and now what you're doing now, have you ever run into any situations where something you've relayed, a forecast wise or a storm coming, has resulted in panic? And if so, how do you kind of balance that with the messaging?
Yeah, again, I love what Amanda said, because in my world, being in central Oklahoma for as long as I was, you do have a variety of different sources of information, right? And a lot of people will approach something like a tornado outbreak very, very differently. And I think that one of the things that I had the luxury of doing is I had a clientele which was really, really limited and really, really small when you're talking about university administration, a student body. And, yeah, that's still 30,000 people, but it's small when you compare it to, say, the DMA of a television station who has to talk to all races, creeds, ages, demographics, or a National Weather Service in their county warning area. I mean, in the next hour, sort of previews of coming attractions, Rick Smith in the next hour. There's nobody better at that than Rick, right? Rick has the respect, he's gained the trust, but that doesn't happen overnight, right? So I think when you're starting out potentially early career, you want to be as consistent as possible about your behavior. You don't want to ride the highs and lows, and that's really hard to do as a meteorologist because we get excited, right? We get excited about things that we're passionate about. And so I think the consistency of the message over time then reveals sort of a trust. And agree with Amanda. If we're doing the 10-day snow map or the 10-day the hurricane's going to hit here map or the 10-day we're going to have tornadoes map, now we've just destroyed our own credibility. I can't understand why meteorologists do that. I mean, yes, it's nice to have in the back of your head that this is a possible outcome, and we can always talk about possible outcomes given the uncertainty, but to start blasting it out there on our own social media channels, we are inviting the one thing we don't want people to do, but we're causing that, right? That's not on the public and how they ingest the information. That's on us. with respect to how we're leading them down a path of, okay, there might be 10 inches of snow 10 days from now, so make sure you're watching us or tuned into us, or and although it's great to have people tuned in to us, we want them to do it on a consistent basis, and we want to be not the roller coaster of information, but the consistent, trusted source of information.
Yeah, we'll dive into misinformation too, because it seems like and I'm not sure if this is going to be in my next slide or not, but yeah, there it is. So that's a good transition. I thought I put that one after because I figured our conversation would go this way. I feel like in the past couple of years, especially, a lot of my times when doing maybe a YouTube stream or Facebook Live or something where I'm getting questions directly. I feel like in the past couple of years, I've spent a lot of time answering kind of odder questions. Is this storm, result of the government? Is it strengthened? Is it, because of this administration or that administration and all this, especially the past couple of hurricane seasons. And I know they've been busy hurricane seasons, but it's been more than just kind of beyond, a changing climate, just some theories and everything. So, Amanda, did you have a lot of this with your recent snowstorm back in January? Did you have to kind of answer a lot of people's questions about what they saw by anybody posting a single run of a certain model or anything? Or
Oh, we have that. We have that all the time. Somebody will say, I saw someone on TikTok say that on June 27th, a major Category 5 hurricane was going to hit my house 3 hours inland. Is that true? And so our biggest thing is obviously having to fight misinformation, but obviously we also don't want to become part of the problem. We also have to be really responsible when we put weather information out there and know that there are a lot of people who trust us and look to us as a good source. And I also think it's never a bad idea to point out other good sources. I'm really lucky where I work in central Alabama to be covered by 3 different National Weather Service offices. Most of my DMA is under the control of National Weather Service Birmingham and National Weather Service Mobile. We also have a couple of counties that are covered by Tallahassee, Florida. But people will say, well, I saw they said this, and then SPC said this, but then you guys are saying this. And I go, that's okay. Those are all really great, trusted sources. And I always tell people, I say, if you don't like the information we're giving you, or you don't necessarily maybe believe it at first, that's fine. I think it's okay to have multiple reliable ways to get weather information, as long as you don't take out the reliable part. Having multiple sources of people who are not degreed, educated meteorologists saying that in 3 months something's going to happen and there's absolutely no data to back that. I just tell people to try to critically think when they ingest information. Who is the source? Who is it coming from? Where did you find it from? That does not mean that there is not good weather information on Instagram, on TikTok, on Reddit, all those different places. That doesn't mean that they can't find good information. I know there are plenty of smart, educated, degreed meteorologists who are on those platforms trying to fight misinformation. So I always just try to tell people, hey, first off, check out the source. If you see a page that's got like 10 followers and they're posting wackadoodle stuff that just doesn't make sense to you when you critically think about it, that's probably not going to be a great place of information. If you feel like you have to come to somebody else that you trust and say, hey, is this true? That might be a red flag in and of itself. I think it's great that people do that, and I'm glad that people do that. But I would say 9 times out of 10, when somebody comes to me and says, here's a screenshot, is this true? 9 times out of 10, it's not. So that's a big red flag right there. We try to tell people, if you have to think about it and say, this seems too good to be true, or this seems way out of left field, it probably is. But I do think that it's great that people trust us enough to come to us and ask information. And I think it is our job as meteorologists to inform the public, not only of the forecast that we're giving, but of the fact that there's bad information out there. And unfortunately, people do it to get clicks, to get likes, to inherently then probably make some money. And so I think when you put it to people like that and say, hey, you not engaging with that content is going to mean they're not making money and they're not taking advantage of your kindness of giving them a like or giving them a share. So just try to be as mindful as possible when you look at information. Most of the time, though, I will say people come to us and say, if you guys didn't say it, I don't believe it. But I do think there are a lot of really good sources of weather information. And I openly tell people, I think it's okay for you to have multiple good sources. I don't think that you should rely on just one person. A whole team at a station, multiple TV stations, National Weather Service offices, all of those places are really, really great places to get information. And then also places where you might be able to debunk some misinformation.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned there for critical thinking too. I
Mhm.
feels like that's something that we do less and less. We just kind of
Yeah.
get bombarded by everything. And I'm excited that at NBC Connecticut, where our team is going to be starting up this new climate series. So we're going to start to work on climate change more and more. It just seems more important in weather broadcasts to kind of go beyond it and just say, what are the effects and what can we do about it? It's not a plug for that, but I'm just using it as an example because last week I got to interview a climate scientist, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, and she's in Texas. So I asked her the question about, how do you, since so many young people are really more interested in climate change because they'll be the ones that have to actually deal with the weather in 2075 and beyond. So I was like, how do you deal with misinformation? And she said, critically thinking, going to the source, and then kind of asking yourself, like, what is the reason they're posting this? Is there a connection somewhere? Is it for a certain reason, for uh, this or that? Why are they posting this? And to really kind of dive in a little bit, which takes, you have to not necessarily do some digging, but usually we just like to kind of scroll along and take things verbatim, but you have to really kind of
Mhm.
filter things now a lot. Now, Kevin, you've had a longer career than us. Has this come into your career more as of
Uh,
late?
I think whether you're early career, late career, retired career, this is daily, right? This is not something that's recent, right? You can go back and even look in the literature and the various things. I mean, go back to 1900 in Galveston and all the pieces of information that were available through various sources, one being Isaac Klein and kind of a weather savvy guy, but there were others, right? There were all sorts of people who were, he's crazy, it's not going to happen. This isn't new, right? It's constant. And I think I want to answer sort of or provide my input within the context of a question that I see in the chat from William. And I don't want to discount the question from Rick that's there. We'll talk about warning fatigue potentially a little bit later. But the question from William is fascinating because it says, how do you message model uncertainty and avoid modelology where one shows the GFS and shows the Euro and they play the two against each other and you have all these different potential outcomes? And my take there is, why are we doing that? Right? We're the professionals. We're the ones with the training. We need to dig in and understand the tools that we use. Each of these models performs well in certain situations. They perform poorly in other situations. We need to be the person that distills that information to choose the model that is best likely to handle this situation based upon our expertise and not just throw willy-nilly model pieces out there as these are all possible outcomes because we know, okay, well, European is biased in this particular situation and it tends to be east or it tends to be stronger or it tends to be warmer or whatever that is. That's where we can be the trusted source, right? By taking all of that output, using our expertise to distill to the most likely outcome, although there's going to be some uncertainty and we can explain that, without just throwing 32 lines on a map and saying, well, it could be any one of these and I have no idea. Well, they could look at that on social media or the web or somewhere, right? We're the ones that need to distill that information on their behalf and give them the most likely possible outcome based upon our own experience and training. And I don't know that we're doing a lot of that now. I think we've become so focused on throwing out 32 different tracks or 14 different amounts that now we've lost the trust. And people are thinking, well, heck, I could have gotten that from the internet or from an app or whatever the case may be. I think we need to take a little bit more pride in what we're doing on our end and distill that information on behalf of the publics that we're trying to serve.
Snaps for Kevin. Well said. I think that's what the kids do.
Did you
I
did
say-
you want to add, did you want to add anything, Amanda, or are you fine?
No, I think he's literally hitting the nail right on the head. I mean, first off, me sitting here and saying, let me show you the Euro, then let me show you the HRRR. Okay, now let me show you the graph. I just ate up all 3.5 minutes of my weather, and I was not able to talk about the important things. The important things are, how does this impact you? When will it impact you? What do you need to do to prepare? My job is to not show you every single model, because let's be honest, there are a lot of people who are on the internet, especially in Alabama. I love Alabama because people are weather geeky, and there are people who understand what the models are, where to find that data, maybe even how to read it a little bit. They maybe don't have the nuance that we do of having years and years of experience working with models and seeing what their biases are and what they aren't. But I will say that's all readily available on the internet for people. Our job is to take that and digest it and then give it back to you in a way that is easy for you to say, okay, my son's got soccer practice at 3:30, but Amanda's saying it's going to storm between 2 and 5. Probably not a good idea for us to be out on the soccer field in the open if there's going to be lightning, bringing it back to the lightning, the little lion with the fuzzy hair. So, I mean, our job is to not say, let me show you every possible outcome. And then you just go, okay, so which one is it? And you go, I don't know. Our job is to take that information and say, this is the most reliable one. Let's show it to you. How does this impact you? That is what our job as meteorologists is. And I feel like the communication and the trust gets lost there when we just kind of show you the smorgasbord of everything and say, all right, you decide. And then people at home go, but I thought you were supposed to be the expert on it. You know what I mean?
Yep, I did.
So I think Kevin said it. Kevin said it
In
great.
my era, it wasn't snaps, it was on the nose, right?
On the nose. I like it. I think I might be a little too old for snaps. I think that's what the younger generation does. So I'm trying to stay hip with them.
I think there's a related question, Steve, from CF. Curious of the panelists' thoughts on showing raw NWP imagery in their broadcast, maybe only in a limited manner, and of course only simple fields to highlight something. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm more distill the available information, but Amanda, you may have a different take, or Steve.
I'm not anti it, but I think a graphic that works really well for us. 3 major headlines. Boom, boom, boom. Here's when it's going to impact you, how it's going to impact you, or maybe give a breakdown. One of the things that has worked really well for us, we talk a lot about people can't find their county on a map. If I show you a map of Alabama, there are 67 counties, and without them being labeled, there are a lot of people who don't know. They know what county they live in, but they don't know how to find it on a map. So what we do is we write every county that we cover, and we put a time frame and says, you live in Montgomery County, here's your window. Boom. Easy. You don't have to be able to read a map. So I feel like sometimes we just overcomplicate it. I think people just, like Steve had said earlier, is sometimes we just take things at face value. I'm just scrolling on Facebook, I see something, and I don't necessarily want to or have the time to like really dive deep into it. So let's just make it as stupid simple as possible. You live in this county, these are the times you need to be prepared. Boom. And if you want more information, we post more information. But so I'm not against it if there is a way that it could potentially help. I don't think that most of the time it does. I wouldn't say that I'm completely anti, would never do it, but I just think that there are simpler ways, and that's our job as a meteorologist, is to take that information and put it into a way where people can understand it and just say, there's no confusion. It says this, boom, 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 done. That's all I need as a viewer sometimes, is just the simple facts.
Yep, I agree with you. Yeah, and it's a lot sometimes. You go on this whole ride and walk through the woods and story, and then you end up, you're like, so what's going on?
Yeah, see, like you just kind of, you lost me a couple minutes back.
You know, I know all the possible scenarios, but I'm really not sure what's going to actually occur. So, so Kevin, are there certain events that are difficult for an effective message? Is it ones that are highly uncertain? Have you had any particular events based on your field of work?
I think the ones that arrive with no visual cue, right? If you've got storms in the distance, they're coming, the sky's darkening, people are noticing, so they're confirming the information that they're receiving from their other sources because they've got the visual cues. Where I see challenges, and this is particularly in the athletic space, the event space, we've seen fatalities in both the live event space and in athletics for those weather hazards that are invisible. The clear sky day winds, right? So when you have a completely beautiful clear day and you have people either up on a scissor lift or tents or something, and now suddenly winds are strong or gusty or those, kinds of things, heat, for example, right? People kind of feel it and so they internalize it, but sometimes it's not until it's too late, right? So for me, it has always been the clear sky. I'll tell you just a little brief story. When I was doing football weather support at the University of Oklahoma, those clear sky days where we had a light east wind, I mean, people would come to me and they'd say, "Oh boy, Kev, you got it easy today. You can just eat hot dogs and watch football. You don't have to worry about anything." And I'm like, okay, first of all, we have a railroad track that goes by just through the tailgate area to the east of the stadium. We have 27 trains that go through every day with hazardous chemicals. The winds are out of the east. If anything bad happened, because we've got people constantly crossing those railroad crossings there by the stadium because they're running and they're trying to beat the train. And we've had, I cannot tell you how many train derailments in Norman at those intersections. Well, if it's a car with hazardous chemicals, then suddenly you have this cloud of hazardous chemicals in your tailgate area instantly and in your stadium 3.5 minutes after that. I was petrified on the hazards I couldn't see rather than those that I could, like lightning and tornadoes and hail and storms and all of those. It just seems like it's easier for me to message the seen hazards versus the unseen. So I think those are the ones that have given me struggles.
And for me, before I get to you, Amanda, the two I think of when I was working in Vermont, I saw it a lot more. I worked in Burlington, Vermont for about 4.5 years, and it was the sneaky snow showers. I think this was before they had snow squall warnings, so I'm not sure if they would have ever retroactively been snow squall warnings, but they were basically like special weather statements that would come out. But who's going to see a special weather statement other than someone, a broadcast meteorologist, someone who's just watching the weather really closely? But they'd be impactful. So these little quick coatings of snow that would be, half inch to inch, they'll come down during the wrong time during a commute, but they wouldn't be enough to warrant a winter weather advisory or a weather alert like that would get the DOT signs going. Oh, those would be the worst pileups and everything. It would just be the worst. So the smaller winter weather events in colder climates. And then for my work at Weather Nation, we covered the whole nation. So we're constantly covering severe warnings and flood warnings. And I would just love to have some kind of more urgency when it comes to flood warnings and flash flood warnings. I know that there are flash flood emergencies and you get EAS alerts. But I just think that when there's like I think back to last year with Helene, and you had that trough over the southeast and it's raining, the hurricane hadn't even arrived yet, and you have flood watches, and perhaps some of the verbiage in there can be like a level of potentially catastrophic, but just kind of looks like another flood watch, and flood watch is just, I don't know, it doesn't scream urgency to me. And maybe there's some more work that the info that the local meteorologist is giving, but I would just love to see more awareness about flooding, because it is hard to predict where flooding is going to occur, where a thunderstorm is going to just sit. But those sometimes are just the worst. You see people like caught in Miami under a flash flood. People are like on top of their cars, and it's a Friday night in Miami or whatnot. But so those are my two particular kinds of weather that are difficult. How about you, Amanda?
Yeah, flooding is a difficult one because that happens during the summertime months here in the Deep South. You get pop-up showers and storms, and we cover such a large area. We go as far east as the Georgia border. We go as far west as the Mississippi border. We go as far south as the Florida Panhandle. And so we really have the whole southern half of Alabama. And when you try to pick one number for all of those different counties, I mean, we have like 15 primary counties, another 7 that are secondary that maybe we're not the primary source of news and weather, but they also can view us, and they're kind of like on the edge of another DMA. So we have so many counties. How do you pick just one number? And then it could deluge somewhere, have that quick turn towards a flash flood emergency, and it's sunny and 90 somewhere else. So those days are really difficult. Trying to convey hey, no one is smart enough or wise enough to know when we say 20, 30, 40% coverage, where exactly is that going to be? We've gotten a lot better at it, but still a lot of the time when it comes to the flooding aspect of it, it's not until it's actively starting that we have. So we're really just trying to play catch up. The other one, obviously, is snow. There are so many different moving parts when it comes to forecasting snow in the Deep South that sometimes we don't have a clear grasp of what's going on until the event starts. That's really difficult sometimes to communicate to people, because if we joke, if you say the S word on TV, it's like all breaks loose. So we try to be really, really delicate with what words we say. I think that comes back to the urgency and the being a great communicator and being able to say more with less. Don't put those things out into the universe until we have some certainty or higher confidence. And even when we have high confidence, something could change. Small little shifts in the temperature, a degree or two up or down, can be the difference here in the South of seeing multiple inches of snow, seeing accumulating freezing rain, seeing sleet, or seeing nothing. And that last event we had at the end of January was just that. We said there was going to be a sharp cutoff. And of course, that sharp cutoff was going to happen right over the biggest city, Montgomery, in our DMA. We have a lot of people who live in the 2 counties north of Montgomery. That is one of the places that I live. I live 15 minutes north of the TV station. They got about a half an inch in downtown Montgomery where our station is. We maybe saw a dusting at my house. I was about an hour and a half south of the capital of Montgomery, and we saw minimum 7 inches. So we knew that there was going to be a sharp contrast between people who saw nothing and people who started to see accumulation. And where that line was going to set up was going to be the difference of a degree or two in either direction. So then you get a lot of really mad people who go, you said it was going to snow and it didn't snow. And then you get a lot of people who say, you said it was going to snow and it snowed a lot. So being able to communicate those uncertainties to people and how that one little shift in any direction can play a dramatic role. I always like, you guys have probably all seen it. When it comes to severe weather, the difference between a watch and a warning, the process of like making a taco or making a cupcake, we try to use that in winter weather forecasting too. If I'm making a cake, I need flour, I need sugar, I need eggs. If I put way too many eggs in the basket, at this point, it's not going to turn into a good cake. It's going to be slushy, right? So maybe the type of precip you get is going to change on how much of these variables we have. And I think people like when you talk to them like that. You say, hey, here are all the ingredients, but if you mismeasure one of these ingredients, which is very possible, and we might not know until the event actually starts, you could get a completely different outcome. I like the fact that we can be honest with people. I think people appreciate that. And I think it gives them a little bit of a better understanding of what we do, because inherently we are forecasting something that is not an exact science. So I think they appreciate that for the most part. There's always going to be people who are like, you don't know what you're talking about. But at the end of the day, we're trying to predict the future of something that is never certain. So I think people appreciate it when you talk to, I think people appreciate it when you talk to them like a human and say, hey, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. But definitely snow in the South. I love it as a New Englander. I'm like, yes, can't get enough of it. It only happens maybe like every 3rd or 4th year where I live. But yeah, that definitely kind of throws everything into a tailspin down here. The second you say that S word, it's all over.
Amanda, you made mention of the use of metaphors to help guide people through, concepts like watch warning. And, I've seen tacos and I've used chocolate chip cookies and I've seen cakes. I learned very quickly when you get in Central Texas, it's now brisket. So, you need the rub, you need the right wood, you need the right, it's like every group.
Food is relatable. I mean, who doesn't like to eat?
That's right.
So I think when you can find something that maybe simplifies it and people can say, oh yeah, like I make a really good brisket. Well, here are the things that you would need to make a good brisket. And if you don't have the right wood chips, or you're at the wrong temperature, or you didn't put the rub on soon enough, or you didn't give it enough time to marinate, all of those things, one of those things changes just a little bit and the whole outcome can be completely different. And I think people understand that.
And I think that's along the lines of the question that just popped up from Carrie, people that really don't understand what these particular terms mean and tools that we might use to help educate on watches and warning. I think these metaphorical kinds of things have helped. I know that
for sure.
My demographic at the University of Oklahoma, when I started, using pictures of the Wicked Witch of the West, right? The lady in Wizard of Oz, when she was just riding the bicycle before she turned into the witch. That's kind of what people look like behaviorally in a watch, right? They're just kind of prepared. And then in a warning, it's the green, people are not feeling well, they're anxious. So those are the kinds of, again, anything metaphorical to get people to think of these terms in something that's, again, relatable. That's kind of where we started this discussion at the very beginning, is how can you be direct and relatable to your audiences? And these metaphors are a great way to do that.
For sure.
These are great questions, by the way, and I want to thank Melissa for forwarding them to us here in the chat. We can see them instantaneously. And thank you for the question, Carrie. That is back to where we began. Amanda said that we sometimes get jazzed and amped up about something, but you got to tone it back. And I think a common theme here has been, relatable, honest with people, and that really goes a long way. We've gotten our T-minus 10-minute warning from Mr. Gideon. I can't believe it already. We're not going to wrap up yet because I wanted to get to a couple more points, but for folks watching, you'll have a chance to stretch the legs unless you've already been going on a walk and maybe get some lunch. There'll be a 15-minute gap in between these sessions too, so you can do what you need to do. Let's see. I'm going through these questions because there's so many of them. I wanted to actually, if we can have, because there's one in the Q&A chat from Rick, Kevin, that was at the beginning.
Right.
About, being overwarned and lulled into I'm constantly under an alert. I'm just not going to pay attention to it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think when I was, dealing with weather in central Oklahoma, there's about 1/3 of the days in a calendar have a life-threatening weather risk of some sort, right? It could be, we've talked about floods, we've talked about heat, we've talked about ice, snow, severe weather, but it's 1/3 of the days. That's a lot. That's a lot to take. And when you're working with university leadership and particularly facilities, law enforcement, right? Because a university is a 24/7 outdoor event, right? People are always on campus, they're always outside, they're always doing things. And so the protection and getting people to respect the weather when you're constantly telling them we're going to have lightning storms today, or we're going to have, hail today, or whatever the case may be, I think that is a danger, right? Where people start to tune you out. So what I would do is I would always, and this kind of gets back to the metaphor, I would always frame the weather messaging in terms of something that they were familiar with. So for example, on a hot day, we would talk about Tatooine and the two suns. The two suns in the sky in Star Wars, that it's going to feel like Tatooine outside today. Trying to bring in different ways of explaining the same situation so that they look at that and go, well, that's new. He hadn't done that before. Whether if it was on, for example, May the 4th, and we had weather, then there was a Star Wars theme because, of course, May 4th being Star Wars Day. So we tried to utilize things that were going on either on campus associated with football or, so there were sports metaphors constantly. There were just trying to tell the story in a different way each time, but still getting at the piece. And I think rather than using the same terminology over and over and over and over again, I chose to storyboard them through either song lyrics, or if it happened to be like, for example, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald Day, right? I would always try to find something to give a little historical context, but at the same time, so it was sort of an on this day in history, but it was using that event to try and turn the forecast into something that was relatable, educational, but different, right? But still trying to get that message across. So that was my strategy at OU was to try and bring stories into it, whether it was the Three Little Pigs and Humpty Dumpty or Alice in Wonderland or whatever it was, right? Or various events on campus.
Amanda, have you used the two Tatooine suns before?
I have not, but I'm about to get ready for 7 months of heat and humidity in Alabama. So Kevin, I will have to credit you that because I am not a Star Wars junkie. But I will say everything that Kevin said is great. One, it keeps us not bored, because I can tell you there are stretches in the summer here and it's just like I feel like I'm saying it's hot, it's humid, it's hot, it's humid. Stay hydrated, don't go outside during, like, and you feel like you're just being repetitive, right? So finding new interesting ways to explain the same thing, I think those are all really critical things. But I also think, and especially a severe weather situation for us, there are some times when we have threats for severe weather, we could have 2 or 3 of them within a week span. And storm fatigue is a huge thing. Warning fatigue is real. People saying, well, the past 3 times you told me there was going to be severe weather at my house, it maybe happened somewhere, but it didn't happen where I live. So I didn't get impacted, so I'm not going to listen. We acknowledge that on TV. We say, hey, I understand that we've been through 3 rounds of severe weather in the past 2 weeks. You guys are tired. We're tired. We have a lot of overnight events, and those things kind of stay in people's mind where they go, I was up all night and nothing bad happened where I lived. So we try to remind people the fact that every situation is different. You can't necessarily rely on the fact that, okay, the last 3 times nothing happened. What's to say that this time isn't the time where it's going to happen where you live? So I think acknowledging storm fatigue and telling people, hey, we understand what you're feeling. Trust me, we feel that storm fatigue as meteorologists as well. But then also communicating in different new ways that kind of meet everybody where they are. And maybe sometimes there could be somebody who goes, oh, I'm tired of hearing her say that. And then you say it in a different way. You're saying the same thing. You're just saying it differently. And they go, hey, they connect with that. And now they go, you want to know what? I don't mind her saying that because she said it to me in a way that I now understand. So I think a combination of those 2 things, being honest with people and saying, hey, storm fatigue is real, but then also finding new ways to talk about it as well is critical.
I think the one thing that I was always pleased with is that in those messaging times when I was using something else, right, to do that messaging, I would get a lot of feedback, right? And there were a lot of people who would send notes back and said, oh, wow, that was hilarious, or I really liked that. So I knew they were ingesting the information, and that kept people engaged, because then I would get the message, hey, Kev, are you going to, they'd seen their app, they'd seen their TV weather. Hey, Kev, are you going to send out another note today? What's it going to be, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And I think the one that I sent out, which was I was so frustrated because there were just so many days of multi-cell pop-up storms day after day that I finally went Ted Lasso Roy Kent on the weather forecast.
Now, see, you got me there, Kevin.
They're here.
I know what you're talking about.
They're every effing where. And I mean, the audience of those forecasts just erupted at that point. I was getting mails, I was getting texts. They're like, oh my God, I get it, right? I am so frustrated with you. And I'm like, that, like you said, Amanda, we get frustrated too, right? So trying to bring in cultural relevant references to try and communicate the same information keeps it fresh, keeps it news. And I see the Roy Kent comments in the text box.
Kent.
Yes.
Yep. See, you went over my head with Star Wars, but you got me with Ted Lasso at the end, Kevin. You got me.
Well, I could just chat with you all afternoon, but I guess we'll have to have our other guests and panelists and AMS members give their opportunity. So I want to thank Dr. Kevin Claesel and Amanda Curran from Texas and Alabama, respectively. This is Steve Glazier from Hartford, Connecticut. So we're all over the place, but it's great that we can all gather today. So thank you, too, for your time. That was an awesome discussion. I appreciate you watching the chat, too, and you had some really great thoughts and answers. I did appreciate that.
Of course. Thanks for inviting us.
Absolutely. Honored to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. We're going to invite Gideon back in and he'll kind of take it from here. But this is just kind of the beginning of the Jamposium. 2 more webinars today, and then there's day 2 tomorrow. So hopefully we're kicking it off on the right note, Gideon, and getting that momentum going.
It's looking great. It's sounding great. Thank you, everybody, for that. And now I got the Roy Kent cheer stuck in my head, so that'll carry me through the day. So thank you very much, Amanda, Kevin, and of course Steve. Thank you for bringing that message to our community. And this brings our Science Behind Weather Safety Messaging webinar session for this Jamposium to a close. So audience, please stay tuned, because coming up next is Going Behind the Scenes During Tornadoes. That's coming up at 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time. And we hope to see you there. And again, thank you everybody for joining us. Take care. We'll see you in a bit.